like Black Eyed Peas, man. They was like the fucking Fugees. And you know, they get a lot of shit when they don't. Oh, my fault.
Now
We
we
started the
good.
show.
This is a good start. We started on
Hey,
the Black
welcome,
Eyed
folks.
Peas.
Word, we're gonna get there. Salutations, everybody. Welcome. This is the Perspectives Podcast. We are your hosts. My name is Littyyy Bro Flacko. This is my the other host to my left, right? I
Right.
don't know what this would be. Holden Stephan Roy. Say hi, Holden.
Hi, Holden.
Right. And today we have uh, a guest that's a grant winner from the Vice Versus Foundation and an artist himself. Everybody put your hands together and give a big warm welcome to Randy Mason.
Thank you.
Nah, Randy does a lot of cool stuff from what I peeped on the internet. This guy's like one of them hero dudes that we should all be giving love to. That's like really deserves that love.
Yep.
Yeah,
Many
now I'm
thanks.
pretty sure like there's been a lot of high recommendations for this episode. So like I expected, you know what I mean, to get very familiar with you, Randy. So like the way that we usually start the show is that we give like our background origin story, right? Comic book nerds that I am over here. Holden is not a comic book nerd.
I'm
Right. So
affiliated.
like affiliated through me.
Yeah.
Um, right. So we came together with this show because I was like on an album run, and the Littyyy Bros, we were dropping like a project, and our engineer on that first project was an engineer out in Montreal, and like the homie might as well be from like New York City, right? Because he's like wild slick with it. Like he's a typical like New York City engineer, right? Where like if I don't promote anybody that comes and pays for my services, then I'm
Mm-hmm.
not obligated to promote anybody who comes and
Right.
pays for my services, right? So like he doesn't ever like promote anybody, but then he promoted our shit. And that got Holden's attention because Holden's like, hold on, I've been following the homie for a minute, and he doesn't ever promote anybody that he works with. So
Mm-hmm.
he's promoting the homies and with like high praise. I should check this out. He checks it out. He kind of dug some of the stuff that we was doing, and he did an album review for us. And when he did the album review, I left. I'm a YouTube commenter. Like I'm not the guy that doesn't comment, who's like, oh, I'm too good to comment on YouTube and shit like that. No, I comment on everything on YouTube. And so like
Right.
I commented and I was like, yo, we should do an interview. And he was like, oh, I already had that in mind to ask you. And I was like, well, let's do that then. And so like he interviewed me, and let me tell you something, Randy, this shit felt like fucking therapy, okay? I felt
Mm-hmm.
like I unloaded fucking years of shit. I'm just like, yo, why have I been doing hip hop and like doing interviews for so many years, and like
Mm-hmm.
I never got asked like about like my fucking childhood and shit
Mm-hmm.
like that. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm always asked like, when you fall in love with hip hop, and fucking like, you know, would you be loving hip hop? Which is just like, oh my god, kill yourself. These are your questions as an interviewer. Anyway, I didn't mean to disrespect any other interviewers. But so the point is, it was a great interview, right? And it set off a great relationship. And then being the typical New Yorker that I am, right? I was like, as soon as you get up on something dope, what do? I gotta put the homies on. So I was
Yeah.
like, yo, I had a great interview. This dude is fantastic with what he does. Why don't we do something together? And I'll bring like all my homies to the table and people from like our circle to the table. And so that's what I did. So like here we are. We're like maybe like a year and some change into the show, and it's been great. And we've like learned so much about like so many of our peers, and
Mm-hmm.
like that's really what I'm looking forward to here, right? Is like to get to know you, who I've heard about through the homies, right? So usually Holden has like all these questions that he has in his head all ready to go, but I
Right.
like to cut him off and set it off with a good almost 2 years, like Denny said. Uh, um uh I like to set it off with like the what's your origin story, right? So why don't you introduce yourself to the people, like tell them who you are, all your aliases, right? And then tell us where you're from. And then after you tell us where you're from, can you tell us where your parents are from?
Where my parents are from. Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. It's an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be here. I have the utmost respect for the whole EO Dub family and movement and all of the different components. So I'm just super grateful. And your origin story is super official. I love when things work out that way, you know, very organic. You connect, you know, you connect the dots, you meet somebody, you know, their work resonates with you, and then, you know, you guys build and create something new out of that. So, you know, props to you guys on almost 2 years. I know that's no easy feat. So props and praise to you guys. So yo, my name is Randy Mason. You know, I'm a hip hop artist and a teaching artist from the Bronx. And, you know, I'm a husband. My wife is amazing. She's incredible. She's upstairs right now, you know what I'm saying? Keeping the kids, you know, in check. I'm a dad, and we have a whole bunch of amazing kids. We have 6 kids, 5 boys and 1 girl. Let's see. So as I mentioned, I'm from the Bronx. I grew up in the Bronx. My folks, so my dad is African-American Jamaican. His mom was born in Jamaica. And he was born in Harlem Hospital. So he's from Harlem Uptown, my dad. And my mom is from Puerto Rico. And then by way of East Harlem. And so, you know, when me and my brothers were born, we were in East Harlem for, you know, back and forth East Harlem and the Bronx, and then eventually kind of settled in the Bronx. But yeah, for me, like, I'm, you know, very passionate about like faith, family, and hip hop. That's kind of like my whole, you know, everything revolves around faith, family, and hip hop. So that's the quick, fast version.
Awesome.
Of Randy.
That's dope.
That
We
is
already there's already I'm already excited. Like, oh, we're interviewing somebody from the Bronx.
I was like,
right up my motherfucking alley. Let me tell you something. I'm from the X2, so you already know how we get down from the Bronx, right? Like, I cheer for everybody and anybody who comes out of the Bronx, and honestly, I cheer for everybody and anybody who comes out of Uptown. Period. So, like, as soon as I see like Harlem, the Heights, Spanish Harlem, I'm like, it's right there. It's right there. We still Uptown, baby. We still Uptown in here.
Uptown.
see,
That's right.
All day.
meanwhile, I am absolutely not from any of that. I'm from Montreal, so it's a whole different experience. A good preface to all of this is when you feel that instinct of, nah, I mean, the answer is probably no, I do not know what you mean. Because chances are that's some shit from New York, and that is very different than what we have. It's similar, but different than whatever was going on up in Montreal. But with that, I do have a bit of an opening question to get the ball rolling, and we're going to go from the TLDR version into the excessively detailed version. So all of this, it's a bit of a story. I mean, so far it's all been one giant 7-minute build-up, but like, we're going to get into it. And this one, it starts with my girlfriend, and she's washing the dishes one time, and she's got her phone open, and she's playing that Black Eyed Peas song, that I got a feeling. Ooh. She's vibing, she's dancing, she's doing her thing. I look at her, and I have this moment of, when in the fuck did this song become Chores music? Right? Because, like, think about it. Run that back to the early 2010 times. People be out in the middle of the night, everybody kind of drunk. This is the highlight song. Even if you were sober in the school's highlight song, everywhere you were in the entire world, highlight song. It's excitement, it's joy. 10 years, 11 years goes by. The song doesn't change at all because it's a song. But we as people, we evolve. We go through the process of aging. And now what was once party music becomes, I wish I was partying while doing chores music, while working out music, while trying to do some of the things in life that maybe are less fun. And I found that to be such an interesting thing to have happen. And it got me just thinking about the passage of time. Like the 20-year-olds, they be out there with whatever they partying to. Maybe it's the Pop Smokes or whatever. And they're not fully aware yet that that's one day the soundtrack of their future chores and gym music. They don't know that when I found out about Pop Smoke, I started washing dishes to Pop Smoke, and that's just kind of how it be. And it's like, with that, it got me thinking about also kind of how interviews and stuff work, and how people talk about the story of artists and musicians. Like, we're all on this journey, but every time you see people talk about it, the starting point seems to be the adolescent era when we form our identity. I started writing raps at this age, or I got into this music at that point. And it's a very important part of the story that needs to always get touched on, but it's definitely not the beginning of any artist story. Like, I'm willing to bet in Harlem or whatever hospital you came out on, there was some music playing, and in that room your little baby self was absorbing it, even if you can't remember it. Like, I know this because, like, I can remember a lot about music from being young. Like, I can remember being like 5 years old in my little apartment in Montreal. And my dad's got all the gray boxes in the room, the radio, the tape deck, the preamp and amp and all that stuff with the wires going everywhere and going out to the speakers around the room for the home-built surround sound experience. And he'd be busting out his like Led Zeppelin tapes and different things like that. At nighttime, though, it was that EDM club music live from the clubs. Always live from the clubs in Montreal, whatever was popping there from that one radio station. And then like my mom's, it was more like love songs and discos and musicals and Disneys and things like that. So it created a whole different ambiance. And I realized all of this stuff I was listening to for years and years and years before I had any control really over what it was that I was consuming. So to get the party started, Mr. Randy Mason, can you run us all the way back to the youngest Randy Mason that you can remember being, and tell us a little bit about what it sounded like to be you, keeping in mind that unless you come from where you come from, nobody has any idea what that looks or sounds like.
Man, I like listening to y'all stories, dude. When y'all putting out your audio book?
Oof, that's a good idea.
I'm gonna cop that. You got a customer.
Thank you for the recommendation.
That was a story. So yeah, I guess as far back as I can remember, what it sounded like being born in Spanish Harlem in Mount Sinai, was salsa music coming out of the barbershops and the grocery stores, my grandmother's apartment, and Washington houses, and on 103rd Street in Lexington. It sounded like gospel music, black church music. It sounded like, we used to go to church a lot. And actually, in terms of like, I love the freestyle and I love the improvise. And thinking back, kind of like in the way that you described it, I try to always think like, where did that come from and where did it start? And I think I'm influenced heavily by the black church and the improvisational kind of culture in the black church, where the pastor would just start playing something and then just start singing something that didn't exist 5 minutes prior, and then the whole congregation would be singing, and it would be this whole movement. So there was a lot of that.
Hold on, you're saying like the church was effectively like one of those loop sessions, but like a group loop session?
What's the
Like when somebody would play like a little line, and then everybody would kind of join in and start like singing it together in a sense.
Exactly. Yes. And that's traditional all the way back, to the Negro hymns and everything like that. But so, gospel music, salsa music, those are the two the biggest influences when I was really, really young would probably be salsa and black gospel.
Real quick, I got immediate like inquiry with that. I'm just like, right, like, to Holden, right, to explain to you a little bit, right, like in black churches is kind of like how many people did not come through like the music industry, either through hip hop or R&B, that didn't get their start in black churches. It like for us, for our artists, like a vast majority of them, this is not but it's actually something that in our long journey of interviewing a lot of people rarely has been brought up. So like, I'm curious if you, Randy, were like brought up in the church, right? Mm-hmm. And if you were, can you like give us a little bit of background on what kind of church, what that, you know what I mean? Because right, like depending on what kind of church, depending on what kind of music was cracking off in there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I agree. I think a lot of R&B, soul icons, hip hop icons came out of, I keep referencing the black church, but but I think in hip hop in particular, at least in my experience, you don't really hear that story as much with MCs. You hear a lot with singers more so, you know what I mean? But yeah, so I did grow up in the church. My father, when I was a baby, I was born in 85, and my father, he came to God when I was like a baby, when I was born. That's when he like gave his life, to Christ, and kind of turned his life around and everything like that. So as I was growing up in, 85, 86, 7, early 90s, we used to go to like Brooklyn Tabernacle, Harlem Tabernacle. These are like non-denominational Christian churches. I guess you could say traditional gospel, big choirs, type vibe. So yeah, mostly non-denominational Christian churches. I grew up in that for most of my childhood, probably until my early teens.
The choirs in those churches are kind of like that's like I'm trying to make analogies here that probably like I've never made before. So if I end up reaching out of reach, you know what I mean? Feel free to pull me back in. But like that's like they're like the black college marching bands of churches, right? Where it's just like they're the top tier of like choir music out of all the like churches, the non-denominational, right? Where like they might get spicy enough to remix like what Kanye's doing with his choir, which if people are unfamiliar, right? Like he's had his choir cover some like SWV songs, some Back to Life, songs that are like black barbecue established like songs, and like he has his choir covering them, and like that's something that actually isn't new. That's something that actually has been done for like decades in those churches that like in non-denominational churches, like the one that Randy went to.
Yeah, I was captivated every Sunday. That was my favorite part of service was the, there were particular people in the choir when they came out to sing. I was like, oh, it's about to be on, I would tell my mom, like, I wanted to meet some of them. Like, oh, I want to meet this person, right? So there was a beautiful time. It was a very influential time of my life, musically, also spiritually, and in a lot of ways. So.
And so,
yeah, man.
Did you have any desire to like be involved in music at a young age?
Yeah, at a very young age. So, there was that early influence, as I mentioned, in the church and kind of just in the neighborhood, the barbershop, the salsa music. There used to be in front of my building this guy playing the congas all the time. So there was it was always this rhythm around me. And then what really kind of set it off, at least in terms of MCing, was my older brother, my eldest brother, Wes, was an MC and still is an MC. So when I was like, I don't know, 8 years old, 9 years old, playing Nintendo, he was like, in the room kicking rhymes and stuff. And I remember hearing that and thinking it was like a song that existed. And I was like, oh, like, what is that? And he's like, oh, like it was something he wrote. And I was so blown away by that. I'm like, what? Like, you could do that? That's amazing. And so from then I started playing around and just freestyling and just like for fun, being silly with my brothers. We would make little tapes and stuff, but it just.
How did you make your tapes?
So we had a little, I don't know, Panasonic radio, but you could put the tape in and hit record and like rap or sing into the speaker, into the radio. So that was like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. Making little tapes and then recording over myself. And then after that, it just got, it just kind of grew from there as I got older, started rhyming more, taking it more seriously. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of your questions, but, a friend of mine, Johnny Boy, shout out to Johnny Boy Vargas, he caught wind that I was like this little kid who could rhyme. And he was like, yo, I got something for you. And he brought me to the crib, and he had a turntable, and he had some records with some instrumentals, and he had it rigged to a tape recorder. So we made a tape of me rhyming over whatever instrumentals he was putting on the turntable, and that was my first tape that I used to bring to my friends and put on in their car, like, yo, listen to this. I wish I could find that tape, but it was all freestyle.
How old were you when you did that?
I couldn't have been maybe 14.
That's wild. So
yeah, probably around 14 years old. Yeah.
So basically, from that process of when you started rhyming, like you start like discovering it and deciding I'm gonna rhyme because you're a brother when you're like 8, and then as the years go on, you just kind of start getting good. Are you just like freestyling out on the block, or how do you actually go about building up enough of a reputation to get noticed enough to get picked into that tape situation?
It was just like me having fun. So like I would be in the house always freestyling and sometimes writing, but it was mostly freestyling. And then when I would hang out with my friends, my brother would beatbox and I would just rhyme for hours and hours and hours and hours. That's how my boy Johnny caught wind that I was rhyming. And yeah, that tape was like freestyle. So I was writing a little bit, but I was freestyling way more. And it kind of just was like a hobby, I guess, a passion. And then it began to become more serious. I remember this was like a pivotal moment. So I was really young. So I was like freestyling and I was starting to feel myself like, oh man, I could do this. And we're going to the store in my neighborhood and we bump into this dude who's probably, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years my senior. And I didn't know him. But he was a beast MC. He was like an incredible MC. And other people knew and I didn't know. So they were like, oh, yo, Rand, you should rhyme with him, blase, blase. And basically he just destroyed me. I tried to kick rhymes with him and he just destroyed me. And I was like, wow. That was my first like experience with like an MC that was just, you know what I mean, next level. Because when I'm rhyming with my friends and some of them didn't rhyme, it was easy to be dope around people who don't rhyme, right? But so when I met, his name is Busy Berserk. Shout out to my man, Busy Berserk, Christopher Robin. When I met him, that changed the game. And I went home and I was like, yo, I gotta work. And then he became like a mentor for me. So Busy Berserk put me on and would play all the hip hop classics and school me on all kinds of different, techniques and rhymes. And we would rehearse for his mom in his living room. We would write rhymes and rehearse for her and then go, rhyming ciphers and eventually playing shows and stuff like that. Wherever we could get in because we were young. I remember sneaking into not sneaking in, but I don't know if it was they didn't have an age requirement on this particular night, but at the New York Poets Cafe, I remember going in, getting on the mic in front of people. Same thing with EO Dub, going to the Pyramid. So this brother that I mentioned, he's the one who would bring me out to all these places. Like, yo, all right, you got to go to the Pyramid. You got to rhyme at EO Dub. All right, you got to go rhyme at New York Poets Cafe. He would bring me, he'd be like, yo, you got to go battle this cat. We would go to Lehman High School and there would be, 50 people outside ciphers and he would throw me in the mix and like, yo, it's time to go. Shout out to Busy Berserk.
So if I understand then, Busy Berserk is like, yo, let's ride. And he already knew the network. And by virtue of him knowing the network, you had just said, I, and then went with him. And then rhymed on command when necessary and held your shit down around all the elders because otherwise it would have been bad news bears.
Yeah, basically, man, that's how it went down. And I got embarrassed plenty of times, which was good for me. It was part of my growth.
That's all of us did. It's just not all of us like to be honest about it, right? Like New York City is one of those cities that like if you grow up here, you learn the motto that there's always going to be somebody bigger and tougher early on in life because it doesn't matter. Like, it don't matter how bad you, like how good or, or in a, bad in a good way you are, right? Like there's always going to be another motherfucker out this bitch that's like bigger and badder than you. It's New York City. Like you're competing with the top of the, like the top, like the creme de la creme over here. You know what I mean? Like everybody's essentially born
15?
talented.
You're like 14, 15 doing all this, if my math is correct. Can we not just acknowledge how fucking boss that still is? Like, I know everybody be like, I was 14 with the old guys and I wasn't that. I'm like, bro, you were fucking there. I was not doing anything like that at that age. Most people was not being cool at that age out there rapping in ciphers in front of places like the Pyramid. Like, that's actually a next level move at that age, in my opinion.
It was wild. I'm super grateful. A little circle of friends that we used to that's all we used to do is hang out and rhyme all the time. We had a friend, shout out to my man who sometimes he would stutter when he rhymed. and it was like training camp. Like it was like no mercy. You know what I'm saying? Like and he got because of it. You know.
Yeah,
So
I was gonna say you getting washed by the OG, right? Like that's the type of shit that is supposed to happen, right? Like you're supposed to get like adversity on the block at home before you're ever even allowed off the block to like represent the block and like say that you're from whatever block. Like you're supposed to get washed up and like that's like you're always. I feel like New York City is always like a breeding ground for like MCs. Like it like it really puts you through the ringer. And like depending on what neighborhood you're from, depending on what lesson you might learn first, type shit. You know, like it just always changed by neighborhood, not even borough. You know.
Yep. Right on.
Yeah.